Yeah, and so my apologies up front. I have to leave like at 10:39. My niece is being baptized this morning at 11 o'clock over at Highland Park Methodist Church. So my husband's going to drive by, I'm going to jump in the car, and we're going to race over there.
Is he going to honk?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope he's real obnoxious. That would be great. Awesome. Yes, and so we're going to do announcements and prayer at the end. So sorry, thanks for being flexible. And thank y'all for hanging out in the back. Just don't fall asleep back there. I know, it's really comfortable. Comfy chairs. This morning my dog jumped out of the window, our bedroom window, at 3 a.m. Oh, no. Fred. Yeah, so my husband and I are running around the neighborhood in our pajamas. Yeah, try not to yell because people are sleeping at 3 a.m.
How did she get the window?
To make a long story short, he is Houdini, and he may or may not have jumped out the window earlier this year to chase the mailman. So we don't have a screen right now. But I've done this before. I've opened the window. It's not a big deal because he's sleeping, but for whatever reason, he decided last night he was going to go on an adventure. Yeah. Yeah, so it's good. It's really good. I was crazy cops were called on us. Like, we look like crazy people. In, like, hoodies. It's like, great.
I've heard
my husband's, like, running through people's backyards. Like, that's private property, babe. You can't legally do that. That's good. So, I won't fall asleep if y'all won't fall asleep. That would be great.
Did you find it?
Yes, the dog.
Where
I
was
was ready to
it?
just leave. I'm like, no, I'm done. Now we herded him back in. He was very excited. He loved the dog. He's like 80 pounds. It's not like a little chihuahua we're chasing around. It's like half a lion.
What kind of dog is he?
He's a Rhodesian Ridgeback. He's a hunting dog, so it's like season.
He was hunting.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised he didn't come back with like the neighbor's cats. Yeah, sorry. Oh gosh, we digress already. So I'm going to say a quick word of prayer, and then we're going to dive in, if that's okay. Gracious God, thank you for bringing us all here safely. Thank you for continuing to journeying with us as we wrestle with difficult questions about who you are and how you are working in our world. Thank you for this time together, and be with us over the next hour or so as we wrestle together with Scripture and through this book. In your gracious and holy name, amen. Book, which is great. I'm going to try and finish the chapter with y'all so Mark can start off on a clean chapter slate here. So we're on page, if you have your books, on page 114. I don't know what it's, is it the same with the Kindle and stuff? We're at the paragraph, but what does this all mean? A nice, easy question. So if you can actually help me out a bit, what did y'all talk about last week? I kind of read through the beginning portions of this chapter, just kind of catch up. What were some of the highlights, some of the questions or dialogue?
I was not here.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, as you kind of think through, so kind of what's going on is N.T. Wright's talking about not all Jews of this period are believing about the coming Messiah. There's some discrepancies going on within the community. They're not sure who Jesus is, and we're going to talk about, does Jesus even know who Jesus is during this time? Talk about resurrection, what was going on. Did you all kind of have dialogue about that? This is good. This is really helpful. Yeah. And then perhaps you spoke about the temple, supper, like the Lord's Supper and the cross, kind of these 3 points, these highlights as Jesus is being revealed to people and the early church is processing who Jesus was and is. Is that ringing a bell? Yeah. Yeah. Oh, okay, good. Awesome. And then he kind of talks about how can we explain the rise of Christianity, because Jesus does reappear, but there's some question about did Jesus appear fully in body or just in spirit? Was he this ghost? But then we hear this account, I believe in Luke's gospel, of Jesus coming up to the upper room. He moves through the wall, but then Thomas places his fingers in Jesus' wounds. Do y'all remember this story? After the resurrection, before the ascension? Good? Okay, good. And so the early church is really kind of processing who Jesus is, because it's very important that they understand Jesus as both God and man. Yeah? Okay. Then we talk about science just a little bit, and then we kind of come to this point where N.T. Wright says, faith can't be forced, but unfaith can be challenged. And that's kind of the foundation of the process that I think we find ourselves in, and the early church found themselves in too. Yes, we all have faith, but what about those who have this unfaith, this question about, was Jesus a real person? And was he just a person, or was Jesus something more divine? And this is kind of where we get this question. What does all of this mean? I'm sure we all have answers ready to go here. So we're on the bottom of 114. And this is kind of where he talks about resurrection. And resurrection isn't a fancy way of saying going to heaven when you die. It is not about life after death. And I love this line. He says, resurrection is a second stage post-mortem life. Life after death. What do y'all think about that? About resurrection? Easter's coming, so we need to have a good way to articulate that.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But sometimes we talk like we do know. And I know N.T. Wright feels that there is a bodily resurrection, not a spiritual one, even though Paul says we have a spiritual body.
Yeah.
But he says that we have a bodily resurrection and will live in the kingdom, a bodily kingdom. And in one of his books he says, perhaps on another planet.
Yeah.
Perhaps.
Yeah, or
But the point
on
is,
the new earth, whatever that looks like.
he's talking about us as bodies and people somewhere, which I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know if I want this body somewhere else, you know? I'm like, oh, maybe a new body would be nice.
Well, Paul said we'll have one like Jesus. Well, he could go through walls, as you said.
Almost, I mean, so if we want to think about it, he's a dimensional body now, but Jesus in resurrection form had this 3-dimensional or even 4-dimensional, where he was breaking through what I guess television calls the fourth wall, where, you know, there won't be limitations in which we see now. How do y'all define Jesus' resurrection? Let's start there. What do you think happened? We can think freely here. Be creative.
I think that the Spirit of God lifted Christ back to life.
Oh.
Or I don't know how to explain it.
No,
But I don't think of our resurrection as going into another dimension necessarily. That's not satisfying to me. Like, now you're going to live in the Twilight Zone.
Yeah.
I don't, that's not, to me it's more of a greater connection with God. And in God we are different beings. That's what I think.
No, I think that's great.
I think a lot of it is that we will everybody will be aware that we do have those 2 dimensions. And Christ said that he was a man and he was spiritual. It was like a ghost. You know, it was really, we could understand somehow at that point. We'll understand what that community is. I'm not sure about, and that's an interesting question. I don't think we're going to stay on Earth. I think physically it will be something else. Because I don't think we're going to have like planets.
Well,
and
what
stuff.
you
I
just
think it's gonna
said
be-
about, like, Christ was man and God. See, and so I think of us in our resurrection, we will become the same. We'll have that new heart. We'll be whole.
Yeah.
It's like we're kind of missing that, but when we come to God, we'll be whole.
So I hear what you're saying, and I kind of like the direction that you're going. I have one hesitation, because Jesus, it's important that Jesus is different from whom we are, maybe currently.
Yes.
Because Jesus is God.
Yes.
And in my understanding of the resurrection, we will never be God. We may be able to understand and embrace who God is more with whatever the afterlife or resurrection looks like, but we were created in the image of God. And Jesus, the Son of God, was never created. Jesus was. I mean, this is where we get John 1. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. But yet we see this, and this is kind of what we're going to be talking about. Who is Jesus on earth as both man and God, holding the tension of the two together, and then this resurrection? Because what's interesting is the accounts that we read about Jesus after the resurrection is some people didn't even recognize him because he looked different. Whatever that looks like, you know, like the Emmaus road, people, some disciples are just walking and they don't know who he
But
is.
is it because they weren't looking for him?
Maybe so, yeah.
I mean, because they said something, they alluded to that too. They had let him go from their consciousness, right? So they weren't even looking for him. They couldn't recognize him until he said, I am.
Yeah, exactly.
But Martha didn't recognize him.
Martha didn't, I mean, she thought he was a gardener, you know, so maybe because of their own grief and their disappointments and their expectations of who Jesus was supposed to be in their minds blinded them to be able to see and to feel, or maybe Jesus, a different being and yet the same being at the same time.
That he had transcended.
Yeah, something like that.
Their realm. And that maybe the only way you could see him is he revealed himself to them.
Yeah. So,
I think,
yeah.
and another point is, I know we see him spiritually today because we see him through the Holy Spirit, but I think so often in our lives we don't recognize we're in his presence, but we don't always see it. And
That's a great point.
Yeah,
And a good
because
thought for
if
us
we
to walk
believe
with.
that Jesus was truly resurrected and that God is working currently in renewing and redeeming the world, then yes, resurrections are occurring all the time around us. And I wonder if we have eyes to see. No. I don't know. I have no answers for you today, only more questions, so just be prepared. So he kind of talks more about some of the options he laid out earlier in the book. One of the things that I really want us to talk about today, I'm on page 118. Hold on, I skipped chapters. I'm on page 116. Sorry, skip pages. So we're kind of talking about how we can participate in the resurrection of Jesus and what that looks like for us present and for us when we die and for when Jesus returns. So we have several different things going on here. One of the statements that he makes is, we are not helpless spectators in this process of resurrection, but we are hopeful participants. What do y'all think about that as far as being partners with the redeeming work of God?
Well, that we are called to be God's people.
Yes.
That's what we're here for.
And so the resurrection wasn't an end, but really a beginning. It was a way for the disciples to live into the work that Jesus had begun and the work that God is continually doing. What's really interesting is that at the end of Mark's gospel, Mark, before the monks started adding their own content at the end, Mark ended his gospel with the disciples living in fear. And that's how he ends it. This is in Mark chapter 16, where they're just paralyzed. I thought that was always really fascinating because the other gospels have a more hopeful, and then they went out to go baptize everyone.
Commission.
The Great Commission, thank you. But Mark ends it with fear and trembling, and they're stuck in the room. I just thought that was really fascinating, because I wonder how often we find ourselves just stuck in fear, especially when we see the work that God is doing, and it kind of rubs raw against where we want to be going. Thoughts?
I don't think it's as powerful unless we're the active participants that you're talking about. I mean, that's how we interact with other people and share what we don't this experience. We're just all kind of in the audience. It doesn't have the same potential.
Yeah, it doesn't have the same potential, and we don't really have a purpose other than just to observe, you know? I really love those theaters that are kind of round, and like the actors are kind of all around you, and you kind of have this, and they're kind of walking among you, and they're interacting, you're laughing, you're engaging, you're a participant. I think Nancy would probably agree with me as far as all great theater invites those listening to participate in some way. You know, John Calvin has this great line about creation being the theater of God. And I think that's a really interesting statement because God is continually redeeming creation, including ourselves. And so what does that look like for us to be participants in that? What do we experience when we participate?
I think it's really hard, especially for us, since, and I'm just speaking globally right now, but because we live in such a privileged lifestyle. And so, you know, I feel good about the work I do, working with children. You know, it's still pretty comfortable because I can still get in my car and I can still go home and, you know, watch TV and do whatever it is. So I think it's really incumbent upon us to dig deeper and look for those opportunities to kind of go beyond our level of comfort, out of our, you know, zone. But at the same time, there are plenty of people around us. I mean, you don't go to another place. There are people right next door. We just have to be mindful of that.
But to live mindfully is to live purposefully.
Right.
And I believe that when we participate in the work of God, we ourselves are being transformed every day. So doing the work of God is this transformation reciprocal between our work in people's lives and the work of the Holy Spirit in our lives. It's never one-sided.
No, and we have to look for those opportunities every day.
And be open to them.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, go
Several years
ahead.
ago, the strategic plan before this one had one of our goals was for our church to become missional servants. And we spent a good bit of time defining that. And in a nutshell, basically the definition was that we wanted all of us to become a part of God's mission in the world. Not to become missionaries particularly, which might have fallen into that, but that all of us can participate in God's work in the world and become servants, the hands and feet of Christ, if you will. But that was, we're all called to do that, to be a part of God's mission and to participate with Him in what He's trying to do in the world.
Yeah, and that's hard work.
Yes.
I mean, it's easy to make statements like that, but that is hard transformational work that is really challenging to our core, especially, as you say, as privileged people who have been told mission work is where you go and you help save someone. That's how I grew up, you know. But actually, missional work is the process of salvation of both the other and yourself. That is continually going.
Serving the hungry, taking care of the preschoolers. There's just a lot of that.
A lot of that.
I wasn't here last Sunday because I was in Arizona in the desert with about 75 people, and we're all educators, and the focus is becoming change makers. And just that little word right there, how can you be a change maker in anything? You know, even if you're just standing in line at the grocery store and you see somebody that could benefit from you doing something different, you're making a positive difference by making a shift and a change. And of course our focus was to teach children to become change makers, that they learn to to serve a purpose that's good and useful. Anyway.
Yeah,
just so
no,
you know what's going
no,
on.
I
But
think
that's
that's
what,
great.
you know,
And
just
I
for
think
my,
it's really difficult because there's a philosophy out there that says that we cannot change any system. We cannot bring change to the world. The only change that we can bring is our inner change. And just like Jesus and all of his parables and his paradoxes, is that once we work on our own change, we therefore bring change.
that's right.
And inner change is the hardest part. It is uncomfortable. Years of therapy sessions.
But it's
Yeah.
also constant. Change
Constant.
is constant. And so the nice thing about that is when you encounter a difficult situation, you can also feel good about the fact that knowing change is always flowing. So it's going to change too. Your pain is going to change, your grief is going to change, it's all going to continue to change. So,
No, I think that's great. I'm sorry, we have to move forward.
yes,
I'm
I'm
gonna
sorry
get through
for.
this chapter. I promise, Mark. One thing, I love this kind of imagery. N.T. Wright calls the work of Jesus, that the work that Jesus begun, as the music he wrote that now must be performed. And so I have this like beautiful imagination here as far as this is the orchestra, this piece of Christ that we all have an instrument to play in. I don't know if you've been to the orchestra before, but it takes all of the instruments in order to bring the music to life. I grew up playing the oboe, which is a really painful instrument when you're beginning for your brothers and your family, because you sound like a dying goose. You know, but you eventually get better, hopefully. But I had to work on my own music. I had to work on my own lines, my own rhythm, and I needed to bring that to the group. I needed to bring that to the orchestra in order to make something beautiful together. And so this change process, this transformational experience is not individualized. It is a community effort that we bring our own change to in order to help the community at large. And that's, like I said, hard work. Let's shift really quickly to Jesus and divinity. What do we do with the incarnation? So we're going to hop back from Easter to the birth, to Christmas, to the birth of Jesus. What was going on there? And don't just say wise men and shepherds. Who was Jesus? How do we articulate the incarnation? Born of a virgin, okay, so Jesus is divine. You know, the Holy Spirit breathed life into Mary. Mary did not know Joseph. This was a miracle. So Jesus came from someplace, and yet from earth at the same time. How do we understand that?
Well, he certainly couldn't have understood it because he was a person, so he was a little person.
Yeah.
And even if his mother tried to explain,
Mm-hmm.
he would not, it would just gone over his head like all of us as children. So
Yeah.
when did he start catching on?
When did he start catching on? I mean, so we have Jesus born of Mary as a baby, as an infant. So we have God from above coming down and being born from below. So again, we kind of have this paradox again of how God is working. Then we have Jesus just living like a little boy on earth, you know? I wish we had more stories about Jesus and what Jesus did. There's some kind of crazy other gospels out there that are really amusing. About Jesus like throwing rocks at children. I mean, it kind of gets aggressive.
Yes.
But he's a little boy. So when does Jesus start to live into his calling?
When he
into his
visits the
role?
temple with his parents.
Yeah, so he's a little boy there. You know, but that wasn't really unusual for little Jewish boys to go to the temple at kind of a coming of age, however old he was, like 8, 13, I don't know. Yeah, so that wasn't completely unusual. But at that point, Jesus is starting to articulate something deeper, a calling that he's feeling in his life from God.
Well, he states to his parents, I'm here taking care of my father's business.
So he's using very Jewish language here. I mean, he's tapping into the long lineage of Israelite boys going to the temple and little boys who are being raised as rabbis. He's doing his father's work. Then we see Jesus in kind of this ministry role. He's maybe late 20s, early 30s. He's gotten all of his seminary studies done. Yeah, is he fully aware at that point?
I still don't understand how he could say, in many cases when he'd be asked a question, he says, "This, only the Father knows that."
I know.
I can't answer that. And then he also says, "He who has seen me has seen the Father." And then he says, "I only repeat what has been given to me by the Father."
I think he knew.
So to me, you sort of have both sides all through the Gospels.
That is like a walking contradiction, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like then you get, so Mark's gospel, it leans heavily on the human side of Jesus. John's gospel leans heavily on the divine side of Jesus. Matthew's gospel is really the Israelite understanding of Jesus, the Jewish tradition. And Luke is really all about Jesus and the poor and social justice. So you have all these different perspectives telling similar stories, but in different ways. One of the stories that really just irritate me about Jesus, and it's Mark, of course, Mark chapter 8, right in the middle of his gospel, Jesus has been going through all the Jewish territories and healing people and having big picnics on the mountainside, breaking bread. And this Syrophoenician woman comes up to him. I mean, she's hungry for something more. She wants to have healing for, I believe, her daughter, if I'm understanding, I may be mixing stories. Anyway, she comes up to Jesus, and the disciples are shooing her away, and she's like, "Master." And Jesus is like, "Get away, you dog." I'm like, ouch, that's not very nice, Jesus. What happened to this like all-inclusive Jesus who saves everybody? And then she says this to Jesus: "Even the dogs eat the scraps from the master's table." And you see this shift within Jesus, as if Jesus was able to see something different within himself, because then he does this miracle for her, and he changes directions, and he moves towards the Gentiles. Isn't that really interesting? You know? That Jesus was just living into his cultural norm of, no, I don't talk to Gentiles, let alone women. You're a dog, which isn't as insulting as it would be in the 21st century. But then she calls him out on something, you know? She sees Jesus in a way that maybe Jesus doesn't even see himself. What do we make of that?
Well, he's showing his human side.
Yeah. Human chauvinistic side.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then he's able to shift, you know? So maybe Jesus is in process as we are in process. What do y'all feel about that? Process can be a touchy word.
Well, I think he had to trust God the Father too. You see that. It's not like he knew everything that was going to happen and had it all figured out.
Yeah. Yeah, he's just living into his vocation and yet being transformed along the way.
And that transformation is helped along by the people, like that woman.
By the
helped
community.
him. Exactly. So
Yeah.
it takes the community.
Yeah, it takes the community to maybe see something within ourselves that we don't necessarily see. Have y'all experienced any of that type of community? A community that's able to see something more divine within ourselves.
Or give us the
Or
confidence.
purpose.
Yeah. Or ask us to do a task that you don't think you can do, and you have a community around you say, you could absolutely do this.
Oh.
And then you get up and you, lo and behold, you have that talent or that gift, but it's only because the people that are close to you saw it in you. You would have never thought to do that, and then you learn something about yourself. And
Sounds like you've experienced this. Just boom, 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 yeah, a little bit, yeah. Anyone else experience this? Or see the importance of this?
I'm not sure it's particularly religious, but brings it because it's very close to my mind. Friday was the last day of early voting. And there were lines, like long, long lines at 7 o'clock. And the people in the line, everybody was scrambling around, and we realized that these people were very agitated because they didn't think they'd be able to be allowed to vote. And the deal is, if you're in line, the line can sit there forever. And it was important to walk out there and tell this line of people as that door shut. And immediately the agitation just kind of fell away. It was like all the two parties, those people were no longer, it was just a line then, just everybody waiting. It was quick. We kind of wondered, well, people are just dreadful to have to be calmed down in such simple ways. And maybe we do see Christ
agitated?
as being not, and that bothers me. I don't want
I'm very
Christ
uncomfortable with
to
it.
have human parts.
I prefer Jesus of John, not Jesus of Mark.
Yeah.
Because, human nature is full of anxiety and fear, and we react in really kind of frustrating, impatient ways. Anybody experience that in their own lives? Okay, that's good. Especially when things aren't just going your way, right? When your expectations aren't being met. And oftentimes when you feel like your voice isn't going to be heard. And that's kind of what I hear of your situation, of people want to be heard, people want to participate. And when you feel like you're a second class whatever, you have a hard time with that, And maybe this is where we see this Syrophoenician woman,
I think we don't stop to think anymore. We're living in a fast-forward world now. So we just sort of all want to be in first place.
Yeah, a success-driven, fast-paced culture that has very little sympathy for those that want to move slower, for those that want to take in things deeper, like N.T. Wright's book, As Slow as We're Moving. Yeah.
This woman felt like she needed to be heard, and she was anxious, and something was happening,
Yeah.
and he ignored her.
Yes.
She wanted to talk.
She wanted to talk. She wanted to be heard. She wanted her needs to be
And
met.
she felt like she was being kicked away.
Kicked away. Well, she kind of was.
Yeah.
But then she's able to speak up.
Had to.
She should. I agree with you. You take this up with Jesus. I think Jesus would agree with you too.
Yeah, but look how she responded. She didn't walk away with her head down and say, okay, you're right. And she didn't attack either.
Yeah.
So she responded in a way that allowed him to also find a part of him. It's also the response.
That's great. Yeah, it's how we respond, even when we're upset and angry. Are we able to respond that creates space for the other one to learn and to reflect and to work on their own change? I think in my own life, I get angry really easily. It's probably because I'm Irish. But when I'm angry, I feel like I'm justified. And oftentimes, I'm right. So, talk to my husband about that. He's like, Josh, it's your fault the dog jumped out the window that I opened somehow. Yeah, and so we react in such a way full of anger that's not creating space. When we're reactionary, we can close off space. We can create walls. And this woman does something different, even in her frustration. She's probably been treated like this her entire life. But she's able to respond in a way that creates space for Jesus to hear her and Jesus to also be changed. It's pretty radical, especially when you're upset.
It's interesting because then in other places, Christ is described as someone who knows what's needed before it's even asked for.
I know.
So maybe that was a point of turning
Yeah, I think so.
that kind of heightened his empathy,
Yeah, but we all have days where I'm like, oh, I'm so in tune with the Spirit. I'm hearing the voice of the Lord all around me. I'm seeing the redemption of creation. Then we have other days where you're like, I need more coffee in order for me to hear anybody today, let alone those that are in need. Yeah, and so maybe Jesus is processing and wrestling with his own identity in God and as God. And then we come to the Garden of Eden. Do y'all remember this story? Jesus takes Peter, James, and John into the garden, and they fall asleep because they're tired of Jesus. I don't know. And Jesus prays. I mean, in agony. What do we make of this story?
What's your question about that story?
What's going on? What's going on with Jesus? What do we think's going on? Again, mystery.
Isn't he asking for understanding or revelation from God?
Yeah, he's asking
He's
for
afraid.
God to take the cup from him.
Uh-huh.
So Jesus, it sounds like Jesus knows what's coming. Maybe not in full detail of the suffering that he's going to experience, but he knows that
The end is
if
near.
there's another way, please, can we find it? That's a hard Jesus for me too, you know? But it's also a really human Jesus that connects with us personally. I think many of us, if not all of us, have been in the garden.
I didn't read this week, so I don't know what you're saying. I can't read it.
So do you think leaning into the human side of Jesus is a part of Jesus that maybe connects with us more fully in this life?
Gives you a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
It'll be all right.
How so? Yeah.
I'm like you, I get angry really easily.
Uh-huh, it's good.
I don't have an honest
You're
record, but
self-aware.
it doesn't matter. Just let me do it.
Yeah, I know.
And, to see him be that, to be just, without thinking almost, just dismissing without thinking. But you can come back from that.
You come
You don't
back.
have to stay there.
Mhm.
So that's good.
Yeah, it makes me, because Jesus was perfect, but maybe not perfectly perfect. That's the only way I can
I
describe
think
this
if
right
he's
now.
perfect, I could never be.
Yeah.
So if he's got a few flaws, that's great.
So like maybe being human is okay.
Yeah.
Maybe Jesus was fully human and fully God, and maybe we're just fully human. I think we are quick to say, oh, in my anger, I sin every time. Well, maybe not. Maybe you're just being a human being, and it's messy, and it's not perfect. But it was messy with Jesus. I don't know, that's liberating for me. I tend to guilt trip myself. Anybody else do this? Especially if you grow up in a more fundamental, I grew up in a fundamental Baptist culture that, there was guilt and shame everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
You just wear it like a suit jacket. Come to church, walk the aisle like 1,000 times, But I don't think we serve a God of guilt. And I think Jesus coming and living on earth is a way of life that we can lean into. A way of life that's liberating for us. And this is why the resurrection is important. Because this is where we find hope. And this is what Paul writes about as far as death doesn't win. The way of Christ wins over. And that way of Christ is love. Even in all of its messiness and its ugliness, love is still moving on. Yeah?
Something that always bothers me a little bit. I agree that it's all about love, and Paul makes it very clear, and Jesus, that there's one commandment. But sometimes I get the feeling that we think we're capable of doing it.
Huh.
And because we know the words, and that's what we're supposed to be. And to me, we don't realize that Jesus is love. Like in 1 John, we love, not because we love because he loved us first. And what I'm thinking is, without experiencing and living with the love of Jesus in our lives, we're not going to really be able to love everybody like we would like. That's what I think.
No, I think that's really interesting. People agree, disagree? Want to add to? How can we show mercy if we ourselves do not know the mercy that has been given to us? I mean, we have to know ourselves. We have to know that the love of God is dwelling within us, that the mercy of God is there within us. And we have to know that to a certain degree in which we show it and reveal it and act upon it. Yeah. Other thoughts on Jesus, resurrection, what heaven's going to look like, who's going to be there. I'm just kidding. Yeah. So one of the last things that N.T. Wright says on page 119, he says, and the conclusion that I reach is at the very last paragraph, as a Christian, is that this understanding of Jesus and his role explains, in turn, why it is that I and millions of others have discovered Jesus to be a personally present and active in the world and in our lives, our rescuer and our Lord. Isn't that lovely? Huh. So I think the difficult thing is, how do we live into that? What does that look like for us as individuals, and most importantly, us as a church? Especially when we're facing really difficult seasons, whether personally or as a community. I'm sure everybody in here agrees on everything. Yeah. Actually, I think I've heard that Discovery, this class is like the most diverse. And you're like, yeah, there we are. I'm like, y'all can get a gold star.
I think
That's awesome.
that George's statement today, and if you haven't been to the worship service, took a lot of, I mean, he really took a position. And I think it's important that he did that.
Yeah.
Because we're a community of believers, and we need to have an understanding of what, what our belief is and how we're going to work together to move into the future. The church needs to be, an active member of a community.
Yeah. And so what so I was in the 8:30 service, and I'm not going to ruin anything for you, but it's, gosh, thank goodness. George. So George does lay out his position very clear, but in a way that's really human, in a way that's really vulnerable, in a way that mirrors Christ. And for me, even when I get angry at Jesus, at George, I still remember that it is in our humanity that we are connected, as well as our connection with God, as children of God. And that seems to, bring peace to my own heart as I process who Jesus was in this world, and how we interact with one another as human beings. Jesus was incarnate, the incarnate Son of God. And so there's this word I've kind of made up, where we have these incarnational connections with one another that brings forth transformation. And I call them incarnations, because I know, it's probably really dumb. I'll patent it later when I write my dissertation. Yeah, but we are incarnated with one another through both divine means and human means. And it certainly doesn't mean that we're perfect. It doesn't mean that we are going to get everything right, that we're going to respond and react in ways that are always helpful in bringing forth unity and love within the community. It doesn't mean that. But it means that we're willing to be present with one another in the good, the bad, and the ugly. And honestly, the hardest work of coming to grips with that is being okay with your own good, bad, and ugly. And that's where you have mercy and love for one another. The more that you realize your own humanity.
That's the hardest work of all, is being okay with yourself.
Yeah.
And until you're that way, you really can't extend a whole lot to other people. You really have to work on yourself. There's got to be that room.
Yeah, because most of the time the ugliness in other people is just a reflection of our own ugliness, and we unconsciously get really angry about that. I'm like, no, you can't be this stubborn and angry all the time. Oh, that's me, actually. I'm stubborn and angry all the time. Yeah, it's this really interesting dilemma that we catch ourselves in. I wonder if Jesus caught himself in that too. Maybe with the Syrophoenician woman. You can't be this ignorant, woman. Oh, I'm this ignorant. Okay.
It's messy work, and it's uncomfortable.
Huh. But it's good work. Well, I'm gonna jet off to a baptism of sprinkling. I'm gonna be a little uncomfortable, but that's okay. I'll dunk her later. Thanks for having me, everyone. You can tell Mark we got through the chapter.
Thank you. He'll be pleased.
Sprinkling? No, it's fine.
We all seem to have places to go and people to see today. Doug and I have an appointment with the priesthood in a few minutes. We have to work extended session today. I should say get to work extended session as we try to make a contribution there. But we do want to honor our prayer requests and any announcements that we have today. And if you have a specific prayer request, please let us know what that is at this point. Yes.
We do have a business today. Linda is visiting with us.
Hi, Linda. We're so glad you're here. Thank you for coming.
She's visited another class, and she's brought her little grandson, so she came to this class today.
Well, great, and please come back. Love to have you. Any other announcements? Yes.
Just continuing prayers for my mom. I went to Atlanta last week. She was supposed to have her knee replacement surgery on Monday, and she had a stroke in her eye on Saturday night. And so they canceled the surgery, and now she's on blood thinners, and I don't know if she'll ever be able to have that knee replaced, but just the adjustment to the changes, and she's lost part of the vision in that eye. So she's
We
92.
certainly will pray for her and you. I know that's a hard thing to deal with. Yes.
Norman Stechter was moved yesterday to the village of Lake Highlands on low water for his rehab. He's doing real good.
Great.
And not much pain. He said if they leave him alone, he doesn't have pain.
It's only when the bottle, I understand that. I understand that, yes.
I work with a lady who, she has twin boys. They're in high school, and one of them is battling some things, tried to commit suicide a couple of times, most recently last Thursday. And so we'll just keep her and her family in our prayers.
Great, certainly we will. And I'll just add that we are still looking for at least two more people to be care group leaders in our organization. We were needing, I think the last communication I had, we were needing people to help greet visitors, and Shannon and John Eric have agreed to work with Pat on that, so we kind of felt
to work with them.
that. I do need a couple more people because we have so many people on our roll, and we don't want to overburden any of the care group leaders. So if you would be willing to serve in that capacity, that's kind of keeping up with people if they're out. Dave and I will try to see to it that you get a copy of those who are here and not here, so that you know how to do that. A quick note, a quick email. Like Norman does have a medical need. We want to be sure that we know that as well. So if you would be willing to do that, something you could do from home, just a matter of keeping up, helping us keep up and be the hands and feet of Christ to people, other people.
Does anybody know how Joni, her surgery went? Does anybody?
Yeah, Joni's remarkable.
Okay.
We went over on Thursday, and she's walking around, and the thing about it is, since she's a physical therapist, she knows exactly what she should do, should not
Self-diagnosing,
do.
yes.
Yes, so she's doing really well.
Great.
Very well.
Well, that's definitely a good word.
Yes.
Let's then close in prayer.
Very
And-
possible.
Oh, yes. Oh, well, I also wanted to be sure and mention the Amadeus performance on Thursday and Friday evening. Nancy and her cast have worked extremely hard, and I promise you, if Nancy Pointer has anything to do with it, it's going to be great. So don't miss it. I think you will be really sorry if you do, because it is really going to be outstanding, and help us all think about some important things about being simply Christian, if you will. Okay, Doug is going to lead us in prayer as we close this morning.
Father, we thank you for our church. We thank you for the message that it gives to the community. We appreciate the Sunday school class that we come and discuss things that we don't always understand about being simply Christian. It was Mary Ann and I this morning in the extended worship for kids. Sorry we're gonna miss the sermon. Be with us all this week is the decisions that we're making in our lives that we can be a better Christian for you. Thy name we pray.
Have a good week.
Next week, everybody's over here.
Yes, next week we will be, I remember our group is gonna go to the inclusion and diversity meeting. So we won't be here, but I'm not sure yet where that's gonna be. Yeah, because we have a number of Sunday school classes that are coming together, so we'll go to an appropriate location.
Who's been to early service?